that's the training school. But from the other. That's it. She has most of the travel.
So, I'm Neicy Carlton, aka Janice, and I graduated in 1970.
Yay!
And
I guess you would have used it. Okay. Thought you were fudging on that.
we can take this outside. And then I lived most of my life out on the farm, and left there in 2006, I think, and lived in different places in Omaha. Taught school here at Carson, Macedonia / Riverside for 17 years, and then a couple of places in Council Bluffs. Retired from Abraham Lincoln. Went into the ministry in 1999 and was a minister around these parts for a bit, and then in 2011 moved to Alaska, and I've been there ever since. And I had 2 churches on the Kenai Peninsula for 7 years or so, and then I went to Ketchikan, Alaska, and had 2 churches there for 3 years, and then back to the Kenai Peninsula, and I just retired for like the 5th time from the original 2 churches that I had. So, I don't know, what else? That's about as interesting as it gets. So, I have a daughter in Anchorage with 2 grandkids, and I have 1 grandson in Omaha. So.
Okay, well, just rambling tonight.
Oh, I do have something else I want to say.
We're rambling
So
here.
we're rambling. I want you to know that this was totally a joint effort, right? I asked Jody if she wanted to do it, and Jody did it all. So you can thank Jody for the program.
She's making me take the blame.
All I did was get her into it.
Just rambling tonight. Tonight, Neicy and I present a small selection of the articles and poetry from Just Rambling by Nora Davenport Mueller. Her column ran in various local newspapers from about 1978 through 1997. The Carson Times, Botany Valley Times, Oakland Acorn. She received the 2nd place award for Master Columnist Class 3 Botany Valley Times from the Iowa Newspaper Association on September 18, 1983. The following selections are not exactly in chronological order, but sort of by subject matter. Mom usually received her inspiration shortly before deadline for the paper, so it was often a breathless rush to the newspaper office. One of the earlier ones, cruising down the river on a Sunday afternoon. That was the name of the game a few hardy souls played last Sunday. It all started when my niece Vicky asked me to accompany a group of snowmobilers down the river. She said you can use an inner tube, boat, canoe, or anything that floats. Now you understand, this was actually in the summer, but the group was a snowmobiler group.
As far as we know.
That's how we can figure it out. This part didn't bother me a bit, as I had made the trip in an inner tube several times from Old Town Park at Macedonia to my home, which is about a mile downstream. The hard part was finding someone to accompany me. I won't say my friends are chicken-hearted, but they sure don't have much faith in my ability as a river traveler. It just happened I was telling my plight to someone in town, and a good Samaritan told me I could accompany him and his wife. I am not supposed to mention any names, but the person is a wrestling coach and sportsman in this area. I would also like to state that I don't believe that Carson, Macedonia schools fully realize what a great potential this man has for coaching. His rendition of Lucille is like nothing you ever heard. After taking care of all the preliminaries, we were ready to start about 2 p.m. We started out from Chautauqua Park and reached number 6 Bridge about 4:30 p.m. It was a beautiful trip. We only had to portage about half a mile. That means we had to carry the boats across sandbars where it was too shallow to row. John and Gwen had an additional handicap in that the only way I can tell my right hand from my left is by looking to see which hand has my wedding ring on it. So consequently, when John the navigator said right, we could left or be in a circle immersed. But they were very kind about the whole thing. It was easy to imagine Indians lurking in the bushes as we picked the wild grapes that hung out over the river, especially when the Indians dived in and came up under your canoe. The only thing was that they looked suspiciously like Skip and Mark Rainey. Yeah. All in all, it was a lovely trip, and we reached Millstone Park about 6 p.m. I have only one piece of advice for you. If you decide to make this trip during a water fight, don't sit in the middle of the canoe, because you are the only one who can't dodge. Right, Charlene? I want to thank the group for taking me along, and it truly was a lovely day.
Wow.
In 1970, did you want that part? Oh,
None.
okay. In 1979, in a 1979 article, she addressed the reason she wrote.
I didn't think when I started writing this column that anyone besides my friends would read it, and I really had my doubts about them. A perfect stranger came up to me the other day and said, "I see you got your shades up." I really got scared and started to wonder how it would be to read this column if you were a perfect stranger to me. The more I wondered, the more word-bound I got. So I just decided to write like you all know me and let the chips fall where they may. I was discussing this with someone the other day who also writes for a paper, and we were trying to figure out why we felt this urge to write. His assessment was that it is an ego trip, and do you know all I could think of was the fringe benefits we get from doing it. For example, on a day when I have the poor Noras so bad I am lower than a snail's knees, someone will call and tell me how much they enjoyed a certain column, or as in 1 or 2 instances, it was someone I hadn't heard from in years. They would call me to tell me to number them among my fans. That's what I call fringe benefits. Another thing that came up in the discussion was how we named our columns. In my case, this was the easiest question to answer. You see, I have this habit of wandering from the subject when I'm talking, and the most frequently used phrase in our family is, "Mom, you're rambling." And being a person who writes just like they talk, because I have very little remembrances of my English lessons in sentence diagramming and such, I figured it wouldn't take long to understand why this column was called Just Rambling. When he asked me to give him a concrete reason for writing a column, I guess my answer would have to be to brighten someone's day once in a while, to lighten someone's load with a smile, to make someone realize how important they are, because without them, this community can't go far.
Family was a frequent subject, and she valued our extended family highly. As I gaze at the roses, gifts from our children, on my kitchen table and in the living room, I know the true meaning of the phrase, basking in the afterglow. It really all started months ago when it dawned on our children that this year was going to be our golden anniversary. When they started telling us what they planned to do, we quickly told them we did not want any big celebration. After many weeks of arguing, they finally took us seriously and simmered down. I think one of the reasons was that every time they suggested something we would say, "Been there, done that." And we had. Over the years, we have had some wonderful anniversaries, although some of them have not worked out as we planned, but all have been memorable. Take for instance, the year we decided to go back to Yankton, South Dakota. My name comes from a sewing shop in Yankton, South Dakota. And spend some time at the hotel where we stayed on our wedding night. On arriving, we found that the hotel had been converted to an old folks home. Not being easily discouraged, we decided we would stay at the other hotel in Yankton, the one we could not afford at the time of our wedding. It was not exactly a night to dream about, because people kept running up and down the halls all night, and there were other sounds too numerous to mention. Plus, the mattress on the beds had more waves than the ocean during a hurricane. The next morning, we revamped our plans and went on up to Elwood's sisters, who live in Olivet, South Dakota. Later, we were sitting at the dinner table, relating the story of our strange night. Two of Elwood's nieces, who live in Yankton, burst out laughing and informed us that the hotel was reputed to be a house of ill repute. Oh well, time changes everything. We had also made a decision earlier in the year to not mention our anniversary, and maybe everyone would forget about it. About the middle of last week, my niece Doreen called and asked if we at least wouldn't meet up to Sparky's for supper. I don't know how Doreen found out it was our anniversary. Probably I had said something to someone. Sometimes my mouth starts running when my brain is not in gear. Thinking it would just be the group of us who gather for our birthdays, I said yes. About the time my sisters-in-law, nieces, nephews, grandnieces and nephews, and their families, even great-grandnephew Tucker came, I knew it was not the intimate little family gathering I had thought it was going to be. As I sat there with tears in my eyes, thinking of my brother Buzz, who loved family gatherings, I remember being at some sort of family celebration when someone asked him, "My Lord, how do you all get along?" Buzz replied, "There are two reasons for that. One is that none of us wants to miss a good meal, and the other one is that if we get into an argument, we want to be able to get in the last word edgewise." Thank you, family. It was a night Elwood and I will always remember, and we love you all.
Henceforth, there will be no more columns about the weather or weatherman, due to the fact that after last week's column, we were hit by the severest storm of the winter. My mother always said, "A still mouth makes a wise head." Those of you who ask where I get my ideas for these columns, this one is done at the request, am I reading the right one? Yep. Okay, my friend Barbara, after she called me up and asked me what I was doing, and I told her throwing all the willies out of the sock drawer. Needless to say, I had to explain to her that my uncle's wife was nicknamed Mate, and after any sock that didn't have, and therefore any sock that didn't have a mate was a willie. Barbara suggested that I write down some of these expressions we used in our family, and me, being at a loss for words, decided to do it. So here it goes. The wheel that squeaks the loudest is the one that gets greased. This one was my brother Louis when we complained of an injustice. Holding the lantern while somebody else chops the wood. We were not doing our share. Shines like a pewter dollar in a mud hole. My sister Nita and I disagree on this one. She thinks it means good will show. I think it means if you make an error, it will show. She's an optimist and I'm a pessimist. Poor Noras, my own. I still have to convince my niece Kathy that when she feels sorry for herself and she doesn't have the poor Aunt Noras, she has the poor Kathys. Think you're God Almighty on 10 wheels and give him an inch and he thinks he's a ruler? These are my son and father's descriptions of someone snobbish. Pretty twice, pretty ugly, and pretty apt to stay that way. And pretty is as pretty does. This first one was my father's when one of us girls asked him if we looked nice. The other was my mother's. Willful waste makes a woeful want when we were being extravagant. These are just a few of the publishable expressions used in our family. You must have some in your family. Wouldn't it be interesting to hear some of them?
Petunias. I'm a lonely little petunia in an onion patch. Every year at this time, my family and I have a serious disagreement over the flowers I plant in front of my house. I like petunias, and my family cannot understand why, when there are so many other flowers that are more exotic and prettier, they think. I like petunias because they're the only flower that can survive grandchildren, a dog, and pigs that break down fences and root up my flower bed. Over the years, I have planted almost every kind of flower I can find. Perennials are no problem, but any annual that grows in my flower bed has a real fight to live. No matter how much abuse my petunias get, I just stick them back in the ground and they grow. Saturday, when Elwood asked me what I would like for Mother's Day, I said, plants. He handed me some money and told me to go into Franklin's House of Plants and get some. Now, Franklin and Noras have been my friends for years, and they know my every weakness. So when Franklin started showing me the different varieties of petunias, I won't say I got carried away. I just overindulged a little. When I got home and started carrying in my plants, Elwood asked me what I had bought. I proudly showed him my 3 hybrid tomatoes, 6 broccoli plants, and my 72 petunias. After several minutes, I came to the realization that I now know the meaning of the phrase stone silence, which was a lot easier to take than the lecture on hunger in the world. Things quieted down until I asked him to rototill the flower bed and where he thought I should put the petunias that the bed wouldn't hold. He told me, but I told him the climate wasn't right there. I thought for a while we would be on separate vacations for Father's Day. But peace has once again descended on Mueller Manor, although the word petunias is not mentioned. Who wants vegetable plants for Mother's Day? If anyone has any good recipes using petunias, they would be appreciated. I hope your Mother's Day was happy too.
Yeah.
One thing you might be wondering is we grew up pronouncing our last name Miller, and we would be in big trouble with our grandmother Miller if we called it Mueller. So that's why Jody says Miller. 'Tis the day after Christmas, and all through the house not a creature can stir, not even a mouse. Left behind, clothes are strung everywhere, on the floor, the table, and under each chair. The Christmas tree that stood so straight and so tall now leans against the wall. It's hard to believe that just 2 days ago we stood behind our chairs with faces aglow. As we raised our voices to ask the Lord's grace, my mind went back through the years as I lovingly looked at each face. It seems only yesterday I looked at those same little faces, barely audible as they praised the Lord's graces. Now I'm sure the Mormon Tabernacle Choir will want them before long. Later, as I looked out the door, I confess I heaved a big sigh. As 3 kids, 2 husbands, 9 grandkids, a couple of friends, and 2 more dogs waved goodbye. Christmas Day was spent with niece Vicki and her husband Tom, along with Jason, West, Randy, and Scott, to help bid us welcome. Once again, there were people spread wall to wall, For over 6 generations, we've gathered to share Christmas cheer and to wish each other Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And I'd like to add this New Year's wish too. In the coming year, may the best of life come to you.
From her desire to make the community better and recognize important events in people's lives, we get many columns dedicated to local people, such as, I'm mad, not angry, just plain mad. I suppose every community has its givers and its takers, but to the givers it is a personal insult when some person or persons do something to destroy or mar an object that was created to add beauty to our town and the whole community could enjoy. A few years ago, the Sigma Gamma Club placed a stone bench in memory of Herm DeWitt and Lawrence Coleman, 2 givers of our town, under the tree by the post office so that people could sit and rest or just enjoy the scenery. This year they decided that 2 large barrel planters be placed beside the loafer's bench would be a nice addition. The planters were filled with white petunias and red geraniums and were a thing of beauty until last week the takers moved in and removed the red geraniums and uprooted the petunias in one of the planters. The petunias have been reset and are doing well, but the spot of color added by the red geraniums is sorely missed. When something like this happens, I always wonder why or what motivates these people to destroy or mutilate anything of beauty. Why do they think they have the right to destroy what someone has created for the enjoyment of others? Another thing about this incident that upset me were remarks such as, "Those darn kids, this town can't have anything without the kids tearing it up." In the first place, I don't believe it was kids, because kids would not have been that selective, or if it was done with the know-how and the knowledge of someone older. I have about decided it is, as I said before, every town has its givers and its takers. The givers are the builders, while the takers are the citizens of our community who are always too busy to serve on any committees, always crabbing about the unfriendliness of the town and complaining about any project being created for the betterment of the town and the community. These are the people who, by the environment in their homes, teach their children disrespect for anything that does not personally benefit them. I wish these people who think that they were created to receive rather than give would read a passage from an old book, which I am slightly familiar with, Bread Cast Upon the Water, Ecclesiastes 11. So Nora's onions, come to think of it, let's make it garlic, go to the people who committed this insult to the givers and those of us who take pride in and care about our town.
She put it to us.
Once in a while.
When Jody said the part about Mom would write about local characters, Josephine told me about something Mel Easton had once told her, which was he hoped Nora died before he did because he didn't want her to write a column. It was 9 ambulances and approximately 1,075 emergency calls ago since the Macedonia Volunteer Fire Department bought their first ambulance. When I think back to those early days when the only requirement to go on an ambulance run was first aid training, and compare it to our present ambulance crew, which is composed of 8 emergency medical technicians and 6 members who have completed a course in advanced first aid, I'm amazed at how far we have come. I guess I shouldn't say amazed, because knowing the community as I do, it was to be expected. In the early days, almost all the calls were emergencies in the immediate Macedonia area. Now they not only serve Macedonia, but Carson, Henderson, and the surrounding area. In addition, they are called for information and help in taking care of minor emergencies such as the one that occurred at our house some time ago. My husband was shelling corn, and he was using a corn rake. He raked up a nest of bumblebees. If you know my husband, you know he suffers from a lack of hair. And although he had a cap on, the cap was fastened with one of those straps to adjust the size, but it also leaves a small hole. The bumblebees, doing what bumblebees do, when they are stirred up, headed for the nearest hole, which happened to be Elwood's cap. Well, to make a long story short, approximately 18 bumblebee stings later, he began to show some frightening symptoms, and to say he was reluctant to go to a doctor would be putting it mildly. But I called our emergency number, and with the aid of an EMT named Shirley, persuaded him to seek the medical assistance he needed. I tell this only to serve as an example that these people go above and beyond the call of duty to serve our community. As I said at the beginning, it was 9 ambulances ago, and now the present ambulances are beginning to show the wear and tear of the ever-increasing workload. It is imperative that a new ambulance be purchased, and this was in 1983, to replace one of those we have which is in bad shape. All previous ambulances have been purchased through community donations and benefits such as the fried chicken supper to be held at the DeWitt Community Building on Saturday, November 19th. You can show your support for these dedicated people who give so much of their time by at least giving them the equipment so they may be better able to serve us in our times of need. After all, the life we save may be your own. There's an old saying that an army travels on its stomach. Let's fill our stomachs and keep the Macedonia ambulance crew traveling.
I wanted to tell you in a special way the feeling in Macedonia after our Centennial Day. It seems like years, but it was just months ago that a small group gathered to plan our Centennial show. Ideas were presented like leaves in the wind. We started to plan the celebration weekend. As plans took shape, there was one thing we knew: we were going to need help, and from a few. Money was the big problem that hampered our plans. We went to the community, and they held out their hands. Auctions and suppers we served by the dozen, not to mention the gifts from our neighboring cousins. Of trials and tribulations we experienced quite a few. With the speed of sound, it seemed time flew. As each of us watched the calendar with trembling heart, too quickly the day arrived, and we were ready to do our part. Now it's all over, our great day of celebration. All that remains is the memories and acclamation. They came by the thousands from near and far away. Thank you for helping Macedonia have its day.
Okay, this one is a mystery to Jody and I. So those of you that have lived here longer than we have, it was something happened, and Marianne, you might want to look this up. Something happened. We don't know the date, but something happened, and the entire town grieved. So it was a year when a town Christmas tree was put up in memorial of this event, whatever it was. So if you know, let us know. Take 250 grieving people in a little town, add a generous sprinkling from all around, all of them searching to find some way to make their world brighter on Christmas Day. Stir in 2 almost little old ladies looking forward to Christmas with dread because their Christmas spirit was weak. In fact, you might say it was dead. Take generous hearts to pave the lane that lightens the hearts and eases the pain. Add the ugliest tree in town. Some say it's the ugliest tree around. Drop in the thought that it might be a good idea to make it a memory tree. Take one electrician with a heart of gold who happens to be a resident of old. Mix with one town marshal, best near or far, who will offer to top the tree with a star. Ask one God to look down and spread his blessings over the town. 1,000 lights show us the way to a brighter Christmas day. The name of this recipe, in case you didn't hear it, it's the recipe for Christmas spirit. Come help us decorate the ugliest tree in town on Saturday, December 17th. That's all we know.
What year was that?
We don't know.
We have the, original typewriter version.
We don't know. So, but you figure it was sometime when the population was only about 250.
You can figure everybody.
It said 2 women mourning, is that what it
No,
said?
250.
250. but there
The
was
entire
12
town was grieving, but whatever happened especially affected 2 old ladies, 2 little old
Would it have
ladies.
been Dottie Witt passing?
Pardon?
Would it have been Dottie Witt passing?
Well, no, cause Ruth DeWitt didn't pass away at that time, right?
No, but her,
No, but
the
Dot.
2 sisters,
Dot.
the 2 sisters,
Well,
Mrs.
Esther were
DeWitt and
sisters.
Ruth DeWitt.
Oh.
Esther and Ruth.
Did they pass
Hers
away
died in
together?
May.
9. They didn't pass
Oh,
away.
yeah,
They're
oh,
the
I see.
grieving.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe. And I don't
Thing
know
to
when
look
they're
up.
up with it.
Well, it wasn't Herm, cause he died on the 18th of May.
It might have been. That would have affected the entire town.
Mm-hmm.
Mom was an ardent patriot and supporter of veterans, especially the American Legion and the American Legion Auxiliary. Through the years, they've marched from generation to generation, always fighting to preserve our nation. They are part of the long, long line that marched through Belleau Wood and through the Rhine. A war to end all wars, it was said, and they picked up the wounded and buried the dead. Through the years, painful memories, time has a way of erasing, but forgotten too were the veterans, the widow and orphan, and the plight they were facing. Once again, the doughboys came forward to help their nation. To do this, they formed an organization dedicated to helping those in need, promoting Americanism by thought, word, and deed. Over the years, the line has marched steadily on through World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and places whose names are forever gone. In peacetime, they strive to preserve the memories of the wars they fought, so each citizen will know the price of the freedoms they bought. With wounds that never heal and friends buried in distant lands, still through the years, the long line strongly stands, ready to answer a knock on the door, whether it be peacetime or war. Ready to march with flag unfurled, these members of the most exclusive organization of the world. Now he may be older, his head bald or gray, and the weight of our flag may make him sway, but give him a salute as you pass him by, because that American Legionnaire is quite a guy. Happy birthday, American Legion.
How many of you, with the show of hands, how many of you ever sold poppies here in town?
Donna Cole did.
How many generations of you? This one is about poppies. The child stands on the corner with eyes that brightly shine. Will you buy a poppy? I don't know who made them, but they're a friend of mine. It's been 50 years or more since great-grandpa went to the war. Both my grandpas served in 1942 to make the world safe for me and you. In Korea, way across the sea, one of my grandpas fought for me. My daddy served in the Vietnam War, but they don't talk about that anymore. Veterans in hospitals can't do much work while serving their country, they didn't shirk. Some stay in hospitals year after year, making poppies, earning money for someone dear. Some veterans can't walk or talk, and some can't even see. That's why I sell poppies. Give for them who gave for me. This Saturday, the American Legion Auxiliaries will be selling poppies. As poppy chairman of the Macedonia unit, I know I speak for all the units in this area when I ask you to support us in this effort to make those who gave so much for us.
Yes.
Is it in the same category as that? Oh. How many of you were involved in the creation of the Avenue of Flags? No one?
Too young.
Too young. There is not a member of Macedonia American Legion Auxiliary who does not know what it is to have a tiger by the tail. It all started at an auxiliary meeting in December of 1971 when we were discussing the shameful acts of violence being committed around the country in the name of peaceful dissension. Buildings were being defaced and mutilated. The flag of the United States was being trampled, muddied, and burned, all in the name of peace. Maybe it was because there was not one of us whom previous wars had not touched and brought pain. In the course of the conversation, someone mentioned the Avenue of Flags that were just beginning to be seen here and there, and we decided that our protest against all the violence taking place would be to build our own Avenue of Flags as a living memorial to those who served our country. I might add, we hoped to have at least 2 and at the most 4 by the following Memorial Day. But we underestimated the people of Macedonia. There was a man named Lawrence Knoll who volunteered to make all the poles. There was a lady named Blanche Clark who kept the chairman of the project on the up and up by reminding her of such things as getting the permission of the cemetery board before we formed committees and began. There was Maurice Clark with the cemetery plat book to make sure we didn't trespass, a Ray Keast, Alvy Kaler, Andy Coleman, and Ralph McCready, who would spend many hours measuring so that some lady would not make them fill the holes back up if they were not straight in line. There was a Ruth DeWitt to notify all the organizations in the community what they were to bring to our first fundraising supper. There was a lady named Susie Keast who, with some help from others, volunteered to make all the noodles for the chicken and noodles that were to be served at the supper. And again, there was her husband, Ray, who didn't get to sleep in his own bed for 2 days because Susie had it covered with drying noodles. There was our parent organization, the American Legion, and a commander named James McLean, plus our own Herm DeWitt to lay the only ground rules, which are, there was to be no names on poles because all veterans are equal. I think it was later, that first supper, we realized we had a tiger by the tail. After only one supper, we had enough to start our project, and more, and with the help of Richard and James Henry, who volunteered to dig, the holes began. And I mustn't forget a lady named Lois Smith, who said, you can't have poles without tops. And so she furnished them. And with the backing of the people of Macedonia, we built our Avenue of Flags. And by the following Memorial Day, we had 36 flags flying. I could go on about the people who have helped throughout the years, but I would have to list the entire population of Macedonia and some from the surrounding areas, along with Margaret Knoll, who keeps record of the flags, and Sue McCready, who almost always is there when it's time to put up the flag. It has been like that throughout the past 10 years, and now, although we have plenty of money to put up new poles to fly the flags, we have on hand, there is no money allocated for repair of the poles. We already have or replacing the flags we have had to retire. Come join our birthday fundraiser at the DeWitt Community Building Saturday, January 16th in Macedonia. Keep all 48 flags flying. I don't know how many you have now.
I think there's 60.
60?
One of my favorite memories of Memorial Day took place so long ago that I couldn't even try to recall the date. But never a Memorial Day passes that I don't think about it. It was the custom of my mother's brother, Uncle Jim, who lived in Omaha, to come to my mother and take her along with whatever child was at home out to the Wheeler Grove Cemetery to decorate the graves of their parents and my great-grandfather, who was a Civil War veteran. Uncle Jim always brought a small flag to put in the hole and was bored in the side of great-grandpa's tombstone. On this particular day, when he put the small wooden staff in the hole, out came a swarm of wasps. I can still see my mother and Uncle Jim running, as they were both rather heavy people and both lame. I really couldn't see why they were laughing, as I, having jumped the little fence behind the tombstone of the beloved family of Maud Smith Delavan, a writer of note from the Wheeler Grove area. I guess what brought this to mind was that someone asked me the other day how I was going to spend Memorial Day. I said, by doing what I do every year, put up the flags on the Memorial Avenue, and then attending the 3 American Legion Memorial Day services in Macedonia. The reply was, you call that an exciting holiday? Now that my temper has cooled, I am going to answer that person with a poem that I wrote over 20 years ago for Macedonia's Gold Star Mothers, and this poem was published nationally. What is a Gold Star Mother? What is a Gold Star Mother? We are all mothers, you say. Why is she different, and in what way? Perhaps in appearance there is none, but to her country she gave her son. Within her heart is an empty space, and behind her smile is a loved one's face. She, like you, lent him for a while, she thought. Others returned, he did not. While we had our sunshine, she had her showers. She took the burden that might have been ours. The cost she has counted in silent tears. She has a memory and a few souvenirs. The picture of a baby on a bearskin rug. The little stuffed dog gives her heart a tug. There are other mementos of those precious years. Toys, scorecards, letters, the telegram stained with tears. And the day she recalls when the battle was won. She had paid for that day with her own precious son. So when you meet her, say a little prayer, but for God's grace, you might be there.
She was not afraid to poke fun at herself. The name of this one, Someday the Irish Will Rise Again. I cannot, when I knew Jody had picked this one, I spent a lot of St. Pat's Day at the Donny Bar with Sue McCready and Mom and that corned beef and cabbage, and I still love St. Pat's Day.
And the corned beef and cabbage.
And the corned beef and cabbage. I am starting a movement to have St. Patrick's Day made a national holiday. You ask me why? Sure, it's a shame you don't know why. Any man that can rid a country of snakes has my vote any day of the week. Besides that, what has ever been done to recognize the merits of the Irish, not only as a race, but as a country? I recently had a discussion with my husband, who incidentally is purebred German, while I, being composed of 57 varieties, am predominantly Irish, on the subject of nationalities. That was how they fought. He asked me, where did I read in the history books about any Irish heroes? I informed him that you can't write about one hero when the whole country is composed of heroes. It was the Irish who built most of the railroad in this country, and they left Ireland not to escape tyranny, but only to escape the potato famine. What has any country done for Irish women except try to make them maids? If no one whistles at Irish girls' legs, it's because they have housemaids' knees. Every country in the world has tried to bring the Irish to their knees, but no one has ever managed to keep them there. Other countries make wars against other nations, but the Irish would rather fight among themselves and settle it with a song and a glass of ale. There is not another nation of people in the world who can write a love song with one hand and hit someone over the head with a shillelagh with the other. Where else can you find a nation of people who firmly believe in leprechauns and spin a tale that would fool the devil himself? I have presented my case for making St. Patrick's Day a national holiday, and I want to wish you a happy St. Patrick's Day. May you be in heaven a half an hour before the devil knows you're dead.
The calendar says I'll be 60 in a day or two. It's hard to believe, but I guess it's true. It really shouldn't bother me, I know. I see my hair drifted with snow, and some days it seems to me I take 2 steps forward and slide back 3. I should be grateful I still see things from afar, but without my bifocals I can't read the lettering on the coffee jar. It seems my mind has developed a fault. I reach into the refrigerator and find a shaker of salt. I curse Mother Nature for playing dirty tricks as I look in the mirror and I see measurements of 36, 36, 36. It wouldn't be so bad if everything didn't sag. Where I used to zig, I see a definite zag. The man I married wants to know why my spirits are so low. I reply, I'm going up the ladder of age another rung. He shakes his head and says, there's only one alternative, and that's dying young. I remember it was also a part of my younger days plan that I would marry an understanding man. It really makes me blue to realize I blew that one too. Yes, go ahead.
Author's note, this one is for you, Jane. I took my glasses off so I can't see you, but I know you're out there. I don't know whether it's because of the publicity over the royal wedding, the history and tradition connected with it, or because this newspaper has become involved in printing the history books for the neighboring towns celebrating their centennials. But I am concerned because a very important landmark in the childhood of those of us who grew up in the 30s has been sadly neglected, since we are probably the last generation who will remember it as a necessity of life. It's kind of a shame. Although it's not a romantic landmark and there are few pleasant memories connected with it, that is, unless you were a student of astronomy and could study the stars if you left the door open on a summer night. Since I was raised in a home where it was the rule, if you were old enough to walk, you were old enough to make the trip. It was neither educational or romantic, just necessary. And if you haven't guessed, this is about an outhouse. I cherish no fond memories of the winter nights when I had to make the trip in blizzard conditions through snow waist deep high, carry broom to sweep before I could even find the Sears Roebuck catalog. We cannot even boast one of those pretty china chambers, now a highly valued collectible as a family heirloom, to soften the memory. Maybe my concern stems from a small twinge of guilt due to my last experience with one of these relics of the past. When we moved here, they would have been on their farm. When we moved here years ago, although the house was modern, The little building still stood out back. Dilapidated, but there. I tried for several years to have it removed, but the answer was always the same. If something happens to the septic tank, we are going to need it. Each passing year, it leaned a little more. It could have made the Leaning Tower of Pisa look like an arrow. So one day, in desperation, I gave it a little push. Well, maybe a big push. Anyway, it accidentally fell over, and I covered the site with dirt. I won't go into sordid details of the conversation that followed. I will only say I lived in fear for several years because of the dire threats of what I was going to have to do, or rather, where I was going to have to go if anything happened to the septic tank. Years passed and my fears faded until 20 years later it happened. The plumber told me we had to have a new septic tank. When I told him, he just looked at me and said, "See, I told you this would happen. Now what are you going to do?" Talk about elephants. Several more years have passed now, and this year, when we reseeded our lawn, I decided to plant cherry tomatoes on the site where the old building had been. The other day, he came in and said, "Did you see the little tomatoes on those vines out there? I'll bet there are thousands." I heaved a sigh of relief, thinking to myself that I had at last atoned for my impulsive act of vandalism. And then I heard him heave a sigh of his own as he said, "You know, if we had kept that old building, it would be a real landmark now, as it would be the only one left in the country. Maybe if I erected a memorial."
Nora had a deep faith and trust in God. She observed the care of her Creator in both nature and people. Every year it blossomed, giving the illusion of a giant pink powder puff. The hopa, flowering crab tree, my mother had planted when she moved to this farm. After my mother had gone, it continued to grow taller and larger. I always felt that a part of her was still with us. When Dutch elm disease struck, killing all the big elms in our yard, the crabapple continued to flourish, far exceeding the lifespan attributed to trees of this kind. With the demise of our elm trees, we decided that we would fill in the bare spots by bringing some cedar trees from my husband's family home site in South Dakota, which we did. We set them out along the fence near the apple tree, not knowing that cedar trees kill apple trees. So it was not long before my apple tree began to look pale, and in about 5 years it had reached a point where it had given up the ghost and had to be removed. Actually, it was only 2, but I wouldn't let them take it out because I kept hoping it would spring back to life. I never forgot the terrible Sunday when my family said, "This is it, it's got to go." I won't go into the sordid details, but my tears flowed like rain, and there was stone silence around our house for almost 2 days. That's as long as I can keep quiet, no matter how angry I am. It was almost 10 years since that day, but every year I have mourned for that tree. Last Thursday was a magnetic day when the creek was crowned with a tiara of plum blossoms, set against the purple haze of Indian smoke coming from the timber along the river. It looked as though Mother Nature was preparing for a wedding. Every time I went outside, I could hear the cardinals calling. They seemed to say, "Nori, over here," as if they had some new wonder to show me. Finally, I could stand it no longer, and I said to myself, "To heck with it all, I'm going for a walk." As I made my way to the creek, I remembered how I had worried when the wooden bridge had been replaced by a culvert, lest the plum thicket would have to be removed. But here it was, blooming in all its glory. I reached the creek and stood in awe, for there, among the white of the plum blossoms, in gay profusion, blooming there, were pink apple blossoms. On closer inspection, I could see that they had sprouted from the old stump of my mother's apple tree. And then from somewhere came a voice, "Oh, ye of little faith, if it were not true, I would have told you so." Happy Easter, everybody.
In the story of the crabapple tree, George and I walked down the dirt road one day, and we could see the stump, and it had sprouted. So we cut a part of it off, and we took it to our yard out where George and Alex lived, and we all lived, and we planted it. And for the first 5 years, George and I forgot it was there, and we'd mow it off every year. So, but it always come back. And so finally, we put some rocks around it so we wouldn't mow it off anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so in 1 year, I swear that tree grew like 3 foot because it must have had this huge root system from being mown off every year, and it's still blooming. Cut some out.
Well, we can do. Mom enjoyed her home as a refuge and was not intimidated by quiet times in life, and yet she enjoyed a good time, dancing, visiting, traveling. Anyone remember the New Year's parties their folks went to? Mom always wore a red slip. Don't know why, I never got to go to the parties. Oh yeah, how about just some of her favorite observations were small things in nature, and especially woolly bear caterpillars. So why don't you go ahead? Let's see. Oh, I was doing this one, wasn't I? Yeah. Over the 20 or so years, I have written at least that many columns on the legends of the caterpillar. According to the tales I have heard, the number of bands on a caterpillar denotes the number of storms we will have during the coming winter. The black bands denote bad weather, the light bands denote mild weather. When neighbor Ruby Jo called the other day and told me she had left a surprise for me on my back porch, it dawned on me that the caterpillars in the coffee can, sitting there, had not crawled in there voluntarily. I had seen them a little earlier and thought, gee, I won't have to send out a caterpillar alert this year as I had to last year. I don't know why, but several of my caterpillar believers and I had terrible time even finding one last year, and those we did were a light beige with hardly a black stripe on them. This year, as early as it is, the story is totally different. According to Ruby Jo, she has seen dozens of caterpillars as she travels up and down the road. My granddaughter Josie confirmed the findings as she traveled back and forth to school. Add to that any number of calls I have received telling me the same thing. The only variation has been that according to Ruby Jo, they have all been headed east. What this little bit of information signifies, I don't know, unless the caterpillars are not followers of Horace Greeley, who advised all young men in the last century, go west, young men. I received one more bit of information in regard to this year's crop of caterpillars. They are black, and I don't mean gray, I don't mean charcoal, they are black. If the legend holds true, we are in for one heck of a winter. With the appearance of the caterpillars, I have begun to look around for other signs of the severity of the coming winter. At present, I haven't seen too much activity among the birds. The only thing I have noted is the thickness of the foliage on the trees. The leaves are so dense you cannot even see the trees, so I really don't know what the squirrels are doing. I know this is a little early for my annual caterpillar report, but I thought I better warn you to button up your overcoat. P.S. I was just thinking this morning as I fished a cricket out of my bathwater. Caterpillars may come and go, but crickets just stay around forever.
So about 3 or 4 days ago, I get a call from Josie, who lives up in Alaska, and she said, when were you going to tell me? said, when was I going to tell you what? That you and Aunt Jody were going to read some of Grandma's things at the museum in Jody. And I said, I didn't think it was that big a deal. and she said, well, there had better be one about me. So this one is about Josie. I am sure you have been waiting breathlessly for my annual caterpillar prediction as to the severity of the coming winter. Thanks to my granddaughter Josie, who came into the house with a caterpillar grasped rather tightly in her hand the other day, I am once again able to make my annual report. I felt rather badly about my reaction as she proudly handed it to me saying, Grandpa told me to give this to you. As most of you know, I do not have a really close relationship with worms, bugs, and such things of that nature. But after taking a minute to get myself under control, not wanting to be blamed for having made my granddaughter paranoid about these little creatures that give me all sorts of sensations, I won't go into detail. But the least of those are goose pimples. I took a good look at him, or her, whichever the case may be, and I was sorry to report that he was totally black, which, according to legend, means that this winter is going to be bad news. Unless, of course, he was a caterpillar of the non-predicting variety. If that was the case, I don't know I don't know whether it means anything or not. Especially since Josie's handling him would not meet with the approval of the SPCW, Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Worms. It was hard to tell. One thing about it though, I did have a very good opportunity to observe him since she put him on the table. Telling myself that this fear of worms is very silly, I proceeded to try to get the caterpillar loose from a terry cloth tablecloth with a toothpick in one hand and a dustpan in the other, while a 2-year-old is screaming in my ear, Grandma, don't hurt my worm. I finally succeeded and persuaded Josie to put him outside so that he could spin a cocoon and become a beautiful butterfly. Although I rather doubt that this particular caterpillar will ever become anything, because Hotshot, our barred rock rooster, was standing nearby as Josie put him down, and a short time later, I saw him walking around with a very self-satisfied look on his face, or whatever. After my ordeal, I have decided that maybe I will choose other means of predicting the severity of the coming winter. I read an item the other day that said, you can predict the severity of the coming winter by checking the onion skins. If the onion skin is brittle and thin, a mild winter is coming in. That seems like a much easier way to go about the predicting business, and I have been giving it very serious consideration. Until today, that is, when my grandson brought home a 3-page pamphlet from school showing the stages a caterpillar goes through to become a butterfly. Do you think somebody up there or down there is trying to tell me something?
Well, thank you for your patience. And finally, thank God we live in a little town where there is somebody to care when the chips are down. Where when trouble strikes on Sunday morn, you can get help with the sound of a horn. Where when you sit waiting hour after hour, families, friends, and the minister giving you prayer power. Where when the calls, flowers, and cards arrive, you know with all these people beside you, you can't help but survive. Where when after you're home, you're feeling sort of forlorn as you look out the window at the fields of unpicked corn. But the feeling just lasts for a minute or two before the calls start coming with offers of help for you. Where when Richard Scott calls on the phone saying, where the heck have you been? Why don't you stay home? Providing the weather is fine, the combines are going to roll tomorrow at 9. He brushes my suggestions for dinner aside. Coffee, cake, and sandwiches are what you'll provide. I immediately called Mary Lua, crying, I'll need the jolly dozen and you. I've already talked to Barbara, Joni, Eloise, and Sue. Max Scott was here the next morning at 8, finding the location of each fence and gate, all while reminding me in tones sweet and low, you don't have that lunch on time, and don't be slow. When they came, it seemed like a score or two, and it wasn't long before they were through. That evening we looked out at the field stripped of corn, and it seemed from somewhere above we heard a trumpeting horn. As stillness fell over the countryside, we heard a voice from above saying with pride, I created the people of all the races and distributed them around the world in different places. I looked over them all, both up and down, took the best of each and created the people in your little town. Like a prayer echoing on the wind, our hearts replied, Amen. May your Thanksgiving be as happy and as deep and meaningful as ours. And that was from our family after my dad had his stroke. Thank you.
All right, Nora.
You want to take a couple questions?
Sure. Can't imagine what you want to know.
What was it like growing up with Nora?
Just fine. With the column, or with regard to the columns, there was a lot of literary license. So, I lived far away, so it wasn't a big deal whether she said I was doing, whether I ever did it or not. But Neicy had to live with that.
Neicy was also away. Because it started in the 70s, right? I graduated in the 70s. So, but I do remember coming home, and if I was home when Mom was writing an article or something, I would have to proofread it, and I hated it. And looking at these, I didn't do a very good job. I hated proofreading. And I got my comeuppance when I became a minister, and I would have to write the message for funerals. And I would call Mom and read them to her, and she'd go, and how nice were you when I asked? She and Doreen were the ones that I always, and if I could make myself cry, I figured I was doing a good job. So, anyway, it was, Mom was a unique person. There was no two ways about it. She could swear like a sailor.
But we were not allowed to do that. We were ladies.
We didn't swear, to my knowledge, but Mom had a lot of the
We
dad
had
and forth.
phrases, you knew you'd cross the line.
Yeah, and it was. I don't know what to say, because that's just how we grew up. We didn't grow up with anybody else. So.
How many times were you in the cave?
Oh, hell.
That's my cousin minister, by the way.
Yeah, that's my cousin.
That's a biblical.
I probably
We
did that 100
spent
times.
half of our life in the cave. We had a complete wardrobe in the cave. We had, Mom was afraid of storms. And so we would go down there, we had things we could do in the cave and whatever. But she would shoo the three of us down the cave, and then she would stand, and it was, like a Dorothy cave, And so,
Or Twister.
yeah. And so she would stand at the top of the stairs and watch the storm come, and we're all in the cave, right? Daddy would refuse to go in, so he was in the house, and Mom was calling the little German all kinds of things, and then I would be in the cave crying because I knew my dad was going to blow away, and
Like Twister.
yeah, we spent a lot of time in the cave. I think I blinked when I finally saw daylight, but yeah, a lot of time in the cave.
Weren't there worms and bugs and stuff down there? Cause they were in our cave.
Salamanders.
It was fancy. I mean, well, I mean.
It was a very nice cave.
Well sealed and, yeah. We had a cot and a stand and a kerosene lamp and unlike Twister, which was just insane, there were two doors. There was a slanted door at the top, and at the bottom of the stairs there was another door. So when that guy flies away in Twister, I went, well, you guys are pretty stupid because we had two doors and nobody'd stand up there and hold that door.
But, I don't know.
Hey, Neicy,
Yeah.
I just wanna say your mom stayed with my grandma, Lois Smith, and she wasn't well. And she was there the night grandma fell and called the ambulance, and poor Nora, she come up to, I was living with Dad, the big house, the big yellow house at the end of the football field that is different now. And we didn't have air conditioning, so there was a fan on in every room, and I remember her at the bottom of the stairs, Bud! Bud! And finally woke us up to tell us that the ambulance had come to get Grandma Smith. And we just so appreciated that she was there at that time.
I think she enjoyed those times a lot too with her. Very much. Well, thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
I told some of you this, but we're neighbors just up the road from Nora, and we were on a party line with her. And she'd call me and she'd say, "Oh, Ruby, oh, sweetie, honey, baby."
Yeah.
She said, "I left my lights on and my car won't start. Would you bring your jumper cape?" I'd go down and we'd get her car started so she could go where she wanted.
Yeah, Mom, that was Mom's unique way of recruiting help. Yeah.
Well, it takes a community, you know.
Yes.
I remember going down to your house and your mom was making homemade noodles and she had the clothesline, wooden clothes thing pulled out, the noodles.
Oh,
And that and cinnamon rolls.
Oh, yeah. Cinnamon rolls.
Yeah. Amazing. Cinnamon.
She
Lori?
was,
At my house, once my three little monkeys were jumping on the bed, and the youngest one fell off and broke his head. Split it open, and I clamped down on his head with my right hand, and it was spurting, and I knew if I moved my hand, he's gonna bleed to death. So I can't drive with my left hand, so I'm trying to dial with my left hand to get someone to come get me. And you were the closest one, we were on M16, so I tried to call you at home, tried to call at Nora's. Well, I could come get you, and if anybody remembers Nora's speedy driving, it's like, oh no. So the next day or 2 days later, it was right around Easter time, she brought a beautiful little lamb shaped cake covered in coconut.
I have the pan.
Amazing. Yeah, that's fun.
well, thank you so much. This
Yeah,
has
thank
been
you.
so much fun.
great memories, guys.
So
We have a lot of good ones here.
stick around. We've got cookies and tea and chat. I'm sure that y'all appreciate you here.
Oh, it's still.